It is your Tuesday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Hope you guys are doing well out there, and great show today, as always. I know I say that, but I always mean it. Great show today. Jeff Day from the Star Tribune, multi-platform editor and writer, also an unabashed Timberwolves fan in his spare time, will join me here in a little bit just to kind of give a different perspective, kind of like he did a couple weeks ago when he came on and we talked after the Phoenix series, before the Denver series. Things have changed, of course. Wolves now getting past Denver, that thrilling Game 7 Sunday night, the 20-point comeback. Now in the Western Conference Finals that start Wednesday night at Target Center against Dallas. Jeff and I will talk about a lot of different things with this team to get you ready for that. Chris Hine, by the way, Star Tribune beat writer, who's been on the show quite a few times lately for good reason. Of course, covers the Wolves, like I said. He will be on Wednesday's show to get us ahead of Game 1, kind of talk through the matchups, more of the kind of looking ahead to Dallas. But Jeff and I will kind of spin back a little bit just to this ride that the Wolves are on, that what that Game 7 meant, and things like that. Some PWHL stuff at the end of the show. Minnesota trying to even that series with Boston at a game apiece. And it's also Eastern Conference Finals time. I'll mention a little bit of that towards the end as well. First, though, what did I miss? Got to start with the Twins. We joke, ever since the Vikings had some issues back in the day, I think it was the 2010 Vikings, if I'm not mistaken, schism became a word, a divide among the team. I don't know if we're there with the Twins right now, but I do know that this has been a weird year and that players and manager Rocco Baldelli seem a little bit tense and annoyed right now, for good reason. 7-game losing streak. Right, this is the weirdest year. It's like they're playing the Wolves Denver series, but the full season's worth right now. Start of the year, 7-13. They look terrible. You're like, what are they doing? They don't look like a functional major league team. They couldn't hit. The pitching wasn't great. It was okay. It wasn't the problem, but it wasn't like it was winning games for them. Then the schedule gets easier for a while. They beat up on Chicago and the Angels. Then they beat some good teams too. They went 17-3 in their next 20 after that. So they go from 7-13 in the first 20 games to 17-3 in their next 20. They're sitting there at 24-16, which is a pace for like 97 wins. You're like, okay, they figured this out. They got back into this mode where they have figured it out. This is the team everybody expected to see this season after winning the division last year, after winning a postseason series for the first time in a long time, things like that. But now they've lost 7 in a row again. So now they're 24-23. This is a hard way to get to 24-23. Pretty much, average, right? Almost the same number of wins as losses. If this had happened like a little bit less crazily, if it hadn't happened in these like 3 kind of polar opposite kind of streaks, bad, great, bad, it wouldn't seem so out of line, right? You'd just be like, okay, maybe they're a little bit mid right now. They're not a great team, but maybe they'll kind of put it together. Now you just don't know what to expect, other than right now they are annoyed at each other. And I think part of it is that it's not just that they're losing. I didn't realize this. Bobby Nightingale Jr. wrote in his game story today off of their latest loss, 12-3 to the Nationals last night. And Bobby, by the way, going to join me on a show later this week, I think on Friday. They've been outscored 45-12 during this 7-game losing streak. I mean, those numbers just tell you everything about it, right? Like, they can't pitch during the streak. That's an average of more than 6 runs per game allowed during the streak. They can't hit during the streak. They're not even scoring 2 runs a game. They're getting, pretty routinely having it handed to them pretty much every game, including especially this one on Monday when they lost 12-3 to the Nationals. Now, a couple of things off of it are interesting. One, Joan Duran, after the Sunday game, I missed this when it happened. Royce brought this up on Monday's show, and I was so much in my Wolves zone that I had missed at Sunday. He talked about Duran's comments after Sunday's loss, where he gave up the game-winning home run on a curveball, said he didn't really agree with the pitch, and then that was, that kind of was interesting because it kind of leads to, the word schism. I don't know if we're there yet, but this was Duran after the game basically saying he thought he should have been throwing a fastball, not a curveball in that situation. He said, "It's not my decision. I thought that he wasn't good with fastballs," talking about Will Brennan, who hit the home run off of him. "I'm an employee here, so whatever I need to throw, I need to throw it." So he's second-guessing the pitch selection. Rocco Baldelli comes out Monday and says, whoa. That's not how we handle our business here. And, this and that and the other thing. Rocco says, in part, I think he's just frustrated and was looking for a way to vent, talking about how he has a lot of faith in pitching coach Pete Mackey, everything that they do. But he did say this about Duran's comments. Says, "I thought it was unusual. I wasn't expecting it. I like to handle our stuff here with a conversation in the clubhouse." Now, it bothered me a little bit because he's now in the media talking about his reaction. He's not really keeping that in the clubhouse, is he? Rocco's not keeping it in the clubhouse when he says that. He's telling us he's surprised, unusual. I wasn't expecting it. Unusual and not expecting it were the words he used. So that's conveying some, not anger, but he's telling us he wasn't terribly happy with Duran and what he said, and especially, how he said it. But he's saying it through the media now, and I'm sure he said it to Duran too, but that kind of caught me off guard. This is also part of that quote from Rocco Baldelli. Let's listen to it.
If our players feel really strongly about something, they can go ahead and shake off. And, when that subject's brought up on the mound, you can say it before the pitch is thrown and not after the pitch is thrown, and I think that would have been more productive to, say something in that manner, not just in this instance, but in any instance.
Now, this was in response to the idea that Duran didn't shake off the call, didn't bring it up in the moment. And I think that's fair. It's hard to second-guess something after the fact when you haven't spoken up about not liking it in the moment. So I get that. Also, though, maybe the kind of thing that he could have told Duran privately and not told us. Good for us. I love it. Like, it's good to kind of know these things, to kind of have this exchange. But if that's what Rocco prefers, to kind of keep it internal, I'm surprised that he's kind of talking like this about it. But, of course, like, if they cleared the air before Monday's game, it didn't do them any good. They lost 12-3. Rocco frustrated after that game, too. I think he's just as frustrated as Duran and anybody else on the team. Twins have a closed-door, players-only meeting after the game. Rocco had this to say about the team's approach at the plate, not just in this game, but in their recent skid where, like I said, they've scored 12 runs in 7 games.
It's not easy to watch right now. We get something going early today, which was nice. That's actually a good thing. We haven't grabbed too many leads, here and there maybe, but we grabbed the lead today, which is good. And I mean, we didn't hold it for 5 minutes. It was gone. And playing with the lead is pretty good for winning games. That's a good plan. And then we went silent. The adjustments. I mean, I'm not going crazy here, but it could change tomorrow. But the guy just stood out there and threw off speed pitches for like 4 straight innings, and we didn't do anything about it. We continued to kind of wave at him and look for fastballs, which today they weren't coming, especially for the first 5-6 innings. And in this stretch of games where we've been struggling, that's been a common theme.
Now, listen, I think if we've learned anything in the last few weeks, it's that momentum in sports is bizarre, chaotic, maybe sometimes non-existent, or if it is existent, it is subject to change, right? Like the Wolves had all the momentum in the world after the first 2 games of the Denver series. Then they got destroyed in Game 3, lose Game 4, lose Game 5. You're like, man, this thing went off the rails. Nice season, but this thing is over. Then they blow Denver out in Game 6. Then they go down 20 in Game 7, and you're thinking the same thing. You're like, no, this isn't it. This isn't it. Good try. And then they come back and win that game. So, like, momentum is a weird thing. The Twins, like, start off the year terrible, like I already said, 7-13. Look like they couldn't beat anybody. Then they go 17-3. Now they're 0-7. They could win today. They could win the afternoon game tomorrow, come back home feeling better about themselves for a home stretch, and get right back on this thing. I don't know what's going to happen. I do know right now that they look terrible. That this is like maybe worse than they looked at the beginning of the year when they looked about as bad as I could imagine. So which is the real Twins? I don't know. Can you even parse that? Maybe the whole thing is the Twins, where they just are going to be really good sometimes and really bad sometimes. Maybe some of this will kind of smooth itself out over the course of the season. I don't know. Right now, they seem angry with each other, angry with how things are going, and things are not great right now.
MGM Wine and Spirits is the choice for savings, service, and a great selection of spirits, premixed cocktails, wines, and of course, ice-cold beers and hard seltzers. With over 30 locations throughout the Twin Cities and beyond, there's an MGM near you. Head to mgmwineandspirits.com to find a convenient location in your area. Get social. Follow MGM on Facebook and Instagram for all the latest news and trends. Make great moments with MGM Wine and Spirits, your locally owned and operated choice for over 50 years. Save time, save money. Shop MGM.
Let's bring in Star Tribune multi-platform editor and writer Jeff Day again. Jeff, you were on a couple of weeks ago before the Wolves played the Denver Nuggets. At least then we had like the partial disguise of we also had a name, image, and likeness story to talk about. In this case, it's just your Timberwolves fandom and just this unbelievable run that they are on that I wanted to talk to you about today. How are you feeling right now, Jeff Day?
Well, I think that it's funny thinking back to what you and I were talking about when we did this last time, because that was one of the more incredible series I've ever watched, even just as an NBA fan, in terms of the swings, these wide swings. And Game 7, I think, was somehow the perfect encapsulation of the series. It's like it was the series played out in miniature. Two teams just taking gigantic runs at each other. And, I had a growth moment last night because my brother-in-law was over watching the game. And at halftime, he's like, I'm going to get out of here. This is kind of, looking ugly. I'm going to go
going sideways. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So he leaves. And then towards the end of the third quarter, he calls and he's like, I think I shouldn't have left. And there was a period in my life where that man would have never gotten back into my house,
because it was him. Obviously, he was the bad luck, right?
But I'm a grown man, so like I know that I sound like Mike Gundy, but
40. I'm 40.
But I let him back in, and they still won, and that was a real growth moment.
That's a growth moment
as a fan, and it's funny. I've been at Target Center helping with multi-platform editing and digital editing for this series. And it's incredible how different the relationship is to a team professionally and personally. Because like when you're at the games working, you don't even really get to enjoy it. It's one of the tricky things that I think people don't realize about sports coverage. It's like you're not even hardly watching. You're just working so intently, especially these days when we're trying to kind of let Chris Hine work in real time and let him keep some of our coverage area and like hit those people while they're watching the game. But last night while I was home, I don't think I've ever watched a game more closely and felt more tension that I can remember much. I was telling my dad that I'm like, it kind of reminded me if the Minneapolis Miracle had taken about 45 minutes, that entire stretch of time. And there was some key... You feel like you're tapping into the team so deeply when you're following these playoff runs. And it's been a while since Minnesota has had a legit, real playoff run team.
Yes.
And I remember midway through the fourth quarter, it starts doing this thing where the Wolves would get it to 5. Denver would cut it to 3. The Wolves would go back to 5. Denver would cut it to 3. And I was telling my brother-in-law is a bandwagon hopper. God bless his soul. He's learning. He's telling me that he's like reading about the Wolves after games and stuff. He's... and I was saying to him, I go, if they get one stop here when they're up 5, this is going to change. The tension's going to change. And he's like, well, why are you saying that? I go, the momentum, this might seem even right now, but the Wolves are flying. And if they can just get this one stop, and that's when Nas and Jaden McDaniels teamed up for that block
Yeah. Yeah.
on the Joker, come down. Nas gets the putback slam,
Yep.
Conley steal, Edwards three.
Yep.
And I lost my mind in that moment because you
Right.
just knew they had taken a hold of this thing. Like I said, one of the most incredible games I've ever witnessed. Something that felt, I don't know what you were picking up on, but there was a moment ahead of Game 5 where it seemed like everybody had walked away from the Wolves a little bit.
Yeah.
And, the ticket prices went down. And I remember I was sitting there, they were doing the national anthem before Game 5, and somebody in
Before
the
Game 6 or 5? 6 or 5?
Game 6, I'm sorry. Yeah, Game 6.
Yeah.
Somebody up in the upper levels was just screaming, and I was realizing, the crazy fans are in here. The ticket prices have gotten to a point where the average fan is back in.
Right.
And that was kind of I think there was something lovable about that moment for Wolves fans, where it's like, for once keeping the faith paid off, and a popular thing that had lost some of its shine came back in such a huge way. And again, Game 7 had some of that too, where I bet a lot of people at halftime, a lot of Minnesota fans, I know my father said it to me, he's like, what a typical Minnesota thing to have this big moment and you don't show up. So anyway, it's just been a while is what I would say about having this kind of feeling.
Well, two things I want to say. One, I felt like going into Game 6, we had this kind of like weird energy where like going into Game 3, it was like nothing can possibly go wrong. The Wolves are on this like coronation, like everyone had this confidence. They were like, this is it, this is the team. And then going into 6, it was like everything's going to hell. And this is like the sports. These are like the two. I feel like Minnesota fans can't have like a regular amount of confidence because because fans here are so scarred. It's either they buy all the way in and they're like nothing could go wrong, or it's like everything's going to go wrong. There's no like, man, let's see, maybe this could be good. It's like there's not that kind of in between confidence. And so, I think Game 6 obviously restored some of that feeling, but then it goes away in the first half of Game 7. And I honestly, I was watching Game 7 at home. Turned to my wife when it was 58-38 after Denver went on like that mini 5-0 run after they're already up 15 at the break, and I'm like, Wolves aren't going to win this game. Like it was like it felt over at that point. And we did not know they would finish the game on a 60-32 run, which is what it amounts to. I mean, it's hard to call it a run when it's almost an entire half, but they just blitzed them. But the more you think about it and the more you kind of look at these weird like stretches of domination both teams had, the Wolves ended up having, one or two more of them. And what Chris Finch said last night really resonated with me was when he said to the team, our best is better than their best. And I thought that was a pretty prescient quote, because it was like, that's kind of the story of this series. Like when everything was going right, if Nikola Jokic was merely being pretty good or like, regular MVP level, not out of this world level, the Wolves were the better team. They just have one more piece, one more reliable piece on the court, usually at all times. And that was the difference.
It's funny because I don't remember feeling that way necessarily during the series, because once it got to Game 3 and 4, I thought this is what heavyweight kind of fights look like, which is two teams that can really and it's befuddling, I think, as fans, where you go, how is it that they can trade off like this? That it can be 1 minute, one team seems like they are completely incapable of doing anything, and the next minute it's the opposite team. But I had a moment when they got, they went to 20 and then they got it back to 15. And I have the receipt of this and I'm going to keep it for the rest of my life. But I sent a friend a thing saying that I feel a rally coming, and I had this feeling, and I'm not a delusional fan. I tend to just be pretty measured, even though I get very tense. But there was just a sensation. And he was saying to me, he's like, I'll read that at your funeral. It was really kind of him. Because I just remember thinking like you, that it didn't seem like they were going to just straight go away. And I think so
Right.
much of the series has been a team gets up 18, 19, then all of a sudden it's 26, 28. And
Yeah.
so we got to 20 and then they dropped it back down to 15. I remember thinking, well, maybe this will be the time that
Right.
we finally get a kind of trading those haymakers back and forth. But um, the narrative around the Wolves, it's amazing how long it takes for narratives to build out and to change sometimes. And that game had so many different players making so many crucial plays. I mean,
Yes.
everybody's focused on Towns and his wonderful, incredible game and his history here and all of the praise that he deserves for getting a moment like this. But Rudy Gobert hitting that fadeaway,
Oh, that ridiculous. Yeah.
where does it rank? It has to be up there with one of the most improbable kind of, and when Towns said God is with us, I mean,
Yeah.
that really did feel that way.
Even they know how improbable that shot was, even though it's not like, if like Anthony Edwards makes that shot, it's no big deal. But like Rudy
Yes.
Gobert dropping in this like shot that's like 14 feet deep and 20 feet high, like no way.
Yeah, even just the measurements of the shot make no make no sense. Um, it just it feels strange. I think that other cities have gone through kind of runs like this, but and for the Wolves to be the last of the top three seeds standing, I think is indicative of who they were throughout the course of the season, outside of Towns going down
Yeah.
and having that little hesitation towards the end of the second half. But I think if you really look at it, it's like everybody knows that defense is so essential to any kind of playoff run.
Yes.
They have had this historically great defense.
Yes.
And the fact that they're going to get to, again, apply this to another great team. And it's like every series, it feels like they're facing a more notable team or with bigger stars or somehow more identifiable in the NBA landscape. And that they just keep taking these steps. And now finally, it's like those inside the NBA guys after the game where at some point you just have to accept that this team is doing this. But I think even for fans, it's kind of a process of getting over some of your just inherent, hesitations that come with rooting for the Wolves, rooting for Minnesota teams, and also just having a guy like Anthony Edwards on the roster. So anyway, I don't know exactly what comes next. It feels like each of these. This felt like, I think one of the things that struck me is this felt like one of the great series of recent NBA play. And so now you're about to go to this next level. Somehow you have home court advantage for the Western Conference Finals.
Yeah, after being a 3 seed. Yeah.
Yes, and you're playing a Mavs team that's, they destroyed for the bulk of the regular season, but the Mavs were playing without their two top stars for most of those games. And so again, it's just been a while since we've been on a playoff run, and it's an amazing thing to have happen. And it makes you feel good. I don't know about you, but after that game, I was scrolling through social media posts, and I was on our work Slack. I mean, you feel just the energy peak, and you keep wondering, what's the next level of this? What's the next level of this? And they just keep finding ways to answer that bell.
It's even been 7 years since the Lynx made any kind of like playoff run and to win in their last championship in 2017. Like if we're talking about, Wolves, Wild, Vikings, Twins, the last time any of those teams advanced through multiple rounds of the postseason was 2004 when the Wolves.
That's the Wild, and the Wild didn't.
Right? The Wild did it in 2003. The Wild did it in 2003. The Wolves were the next year.
Okay.
The Twins were the year before that. Twins went to the ALCS. I guess they didn't advance. No, they did advance 2 rounds. No, they only advanced 1 round that year, but they made it to the ALCS. But like Wild made it through 2 rounds in 2003. Wolves made it through 2 rounds in 2004. Like the Vikings have been in the NFC title game, but they've always gotten there with a bye and then a win, and then you're there. So like to be on a playoff run to me feels like you've got to win a couple series, right? Like you advance a couple rounds. Like if you advance 1 round, like you've done something, but that's not a run. Like you didn't. And the Wild, 10 years ago or so, had a couple years where they got past a first round where they won a game 7 against like Colorado, and 1 year they beat St. Louis, but then they got eliminated in the next round. That's not a playoff run to me. Like this is the first bona fide playoff run for one of those 4 teams in 20 years since KG did it.
and that's why the city, I'm such a lunatic. There was a period of time where everybody was getting so hyped about this after game two, and all of a sudden it feels like the whole world gloms on to this thing,
Right.
especially anybody in Minnesota. And I don't know about you, but I have this weird thing where I hate liking things that everybody else
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Me
likes.
too. Yeah, me too.
And
It's
so there was this
my
part of me
hipster
that thought,
sensibility. It's my
yeah,
yeah.
who are these people? Like
Yes,
what's
Johnny come lately. This is get
yeah,
off my bandwagon.
Senator Klobuchar measuring the hoops. No, I'm joking. But it's like this whole thing of what does it mean to be a fan and to care about something, and what does it mean to get into it in a way that maybe feels more of the time and of the moment? I think we're going to see that go absolutely nuts now because there's something galvanizing and something civic about sports, which can at times make me uncomfortable because I think sports is by its nature a distractive element. It's
Right.
entertainment.
Yeah.
It holds no intrinsic value to a human being's life,
It's completely
but
irrational. It's
it's
completely
completely
irrational,
irrational,
but
but it
in a great,
manifests.
in a good way.
Yeah.
In a good way. A lot of
Yes, and
times
it
it can
makes
be.
you feel. Nothing makes people feel this way.
No.
A great film, a great concert, maybe if you're some of those deadheads might say that, they hit the transcendent plane. But there is nothing in this life outside of a medical mishap to a family member that will make me pace the way that a tense fourth quarter of a
Oh yeah.
Timberwolves game seven makes me. I couldn't even like really sit. I just had too much energy in my shoulders. I had a tough time watching free throws. I'm just like, I don't know. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, this goes back to like the difference between being a working professional and having the night off,
Yeah.
although I did some work after the game ended, but
Yeah.
the night off and just watching a game because to be a fan of something is to be irrational and and to feel like your life is kind of flashing before you a little bit. You're going through memory and thinking about. I remember, Kevin Martin hitting the game winner on the opening day one year for Sacramento when they were playing the Wolves, and like I think about all the opening days I went through with my father and just all I call them opening days. I don't know what in the world the proper nomenclature is there for because that's baseball. But anyway,
It's opening night, probably. Yeah, it's
opening night,
the
yeah,
first game of the year, the opener.
yeah. But anyway, and then you're just sitting there thinking, we just beat the Denver Nuggets in a game seven on the road in a game where you're down 20, and none of that makes a ton of sense.
No.
Um, and because it's going against everything you know about
Right.
your history as a fan. And I don't know. I don't know where it ranks in terms of like the most impactful wins in Minnesota history. I'm sure right now it is high up there. It's probably only a couple of Twins wins in those World Series years, and then if Maya Moore hitting the game winner. I'm just trying to think of
Yeah.
like because it's historic, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
I was getting this crap from my brother. He's like, "You gave up at half." I go, "I didn't give up at half. I said they're probably going to lose." And the reason I said that is because no team had ever done
Because
what
it
they.
was true. Yeah, like
Yes.
probably going to lose is not giving up. It's studying the facts and saying, yeah, 97, 98% chance they probably lose this game. So
What do you think about, I just sometimes think about if the Nuggets, I think it's one of those places where I try to sometimes put myself in the shoes of the team that just lost.
mhm.
And do you think they felt that they gave it away, or do you think that that was just because the big thing that I kept thinking is Michael Malone is playing Jokic too much, and he's
Yeah,
not giving him a rest. And I wondered if that played out, or if they just think, kind of like Finch said, we just lost to the better team. It's a tough.
I think it's
I
both. I think they're probably like sitting there, obviously, like it got away from them. Anytime you're up 20 and you're the defending
right,
champs, you feel like you should have won, but they were gassed. Like,
yeah,
but in order to get the lead they got, they did what they did, right? Like they barely rested anybody. They
yep,
played hellacious defense in the first
yep,
half and just kind of like they tried to blitz the Wolves to the point where the Wolves would just go away. And then when the Wolves came
mm,
back,
yeah,
Denver's didn't have the energy to match. They were like, "Uh-oh, we kind of used all our energy a couple hours ago. Like I don't know what we're gonna do now." And so I think their spirit was willing, but their bodies just didn't seem to be. Especially like think about like the cat put back dunk with about 40
yes,
seconds left that really like erased any tension there could have been at the end. Like they probably still would have won even if Denver gets that rebound. But Cat comes flying in from that dunk. Nobody puts a body on him. Nobody's even looking
yes,
at him. It was two
yes,
guys on Conley, but two guys try to stop Conley, but there was nobody to clean that up. And it's like
yeah.
that's a tired team. That's not what Denver usually does, right?
Yeah, and same with the Nas putback, where you're just
Yeah,
seeing kind of a little bit of an extra. And it's funny because that goes back to what you were saying about having one guy on the court, and it's like when you can go from Towns to Nas
which was
versus what.
huge when Towns got his
Yes,
fifth, being able to do that
yes, and you bring in this guy who brings instant energy, and even his assist to Edwards on that
was
three that made
great.
it.
Yeah,
You just and the blocks and the defense, and that maybe is what we're really talking about here when it's roster construction. That they had that one extra person that not only could be relied on for like just to take some minutes, but quality minutes and game changing minutes. And I just, it really is gratifying for these. You kind of come to like these players, and if you have good reporters like we do, you learn about them. And Towns is obviously like the linchpin of all this because he's a franchise player and he's been so loyal to the Wolves for all these years and been such a articulate and smart player and somebody who drives national media insane, and people can't, for whatever reason, they get down in his game. And you just watch that game and his composure, and it just feels good. You're like, man, I feel happy for this multimillionaire who's
yeah,
living, an incredible life and has incredible talent. But this stuff isn't guaranteed to any fan base, and the
right.
opportunity to prove yourself in these spaces isn't guaranteed to any fan base. And Game Sevens create legacies. And if you would have said to me, how will Karl Anthony Towns do on the road in Game 7 against the Denver Nuggets? A fan of his and somebody who likes this team a lot, would have struggled to really have high levels of confidence in what he was capable of there. And it's like he's grown in real time. You're talking about a
Yes,
guy
I agree.
defense was loathed. And it's like,
Right,
who's our guy who's going to guard? And I think it's a size thing. Gobert can't handle his body, and
right,
Towns can.
right.
It's just incredible. I don't know what comes next. It's like, you start having this feeling where all of a sudden, everybody's kind of leaning, saying, oh, this Wolves team might be real. And that's where, again, your inherent like mind goes to, well, now will they slip up or will something backslide or whatever? But they just have a lot of confidence, and it's thrilling. It's thrilling to have, not since maybe the 98 Vikings has there been a more confident looking group of people who not only want to win, but are talking trash on their way through it,
Mm-hmm.
are energetic, and just, yeah, it's the whole vibe of that team. And Edwards it's been the big joke today, or not a joke, but like whatever, a viral moment in the traditional sense. But it's like a player like that changes how people feel about their state, about their
Mm-hmm.
sports teams. We sometimes forget that Prince lived here. Prince is the coolest man. Prince is the coolest man maybe in American history. He's at least up there. It's like him and Paul Revere and I'm trying to think, Joan Didion probably. I don't know who all are the coolest people ever, but there's a couple of them. Prince is one of them, and that man.
Don't get a lot of Prince and Paul Revere.
I'm just thinking about like the people who kind of could get people moving.
Yes,
So anyway,
British are coming.
yeah, but sometimes it's like you don't know how to have that confidence, and Ant
Right.
is just a person who makes you feel good
Yes.
to be a Wolves fan, makes you feel great to be a Wolves fan. So anyway, who knows what I'm even talking.
Royal Credit Union's smart checking accounts offer no monthly fees and no minimum balance. Enjoy financial freedom when you open your Royal Credit Union smart checking account online at rcu.org/go checking. Insured by NCUA.
They're favored now in this series against Dallas.
Yeah.
I think whatever the implied betting odds are like, I think I saw an email like the implied betting odds say that 61% Wolves, chance to win this series. So it's, not an overwhelming favorite, and Dallas is certainly playing very well.
Yes.
They've been better since everyone's gotten healthy, of course, better since the trade deadline when they added some big bodies, which would have helped them against either Minnesota or Denver.
Yep.
But if you just look at it on its face and say, yeah, this is the most confident Minnesota team, a dominant team, but not like the 98 Vikings where nothing bad has ever happened until the worst thing happens at the last moment.
That's a good point.
They've been tested, they've been tested and they've had some adversity for sure, more than that team. But yeah, not since then have you looked at a team and said, at this moment, outside of the Lynx again, and not to discredit the Lynx, but I would say the scope of this is a little bit bigger than that. That you look at it and you say, yeah, this is the better team, and if they do the things that they have been doing, they will go to the NBA Finals. I think
Yeah,
that's factual. That's as factual as saying that they were probably going to lose at halftime until they didn't.
that's exactly right. Yeah, I think it's a fair point that they certainly feel, although there's something about two scorers, and they have been tested. It's almost like they're getting tested in the right ways to build a championship type season, because even just taking down the Suns, which was supposedly a terrible
Right.
match for them with two really strong scorers and Kevin Durant, I mean guards, I'm saying, and then Kevin Durant on top of that, they
Hmm.
run them. Denver provides the ultimate, I mean, a championship challenge, the
Yeah.
real championship challenge. And it's like, can you win in game 7 on the road against a defending NBA champ? What a sentence. Like,
Yeah.
that, I still cannot believe they came back in that game.
No.
And now you're going to get another chance against a team that is more like the Wolves than they are like any of those teams. I
Sure.
think that Denver is. Kyrie, of course, has championship pedigree. I shouldn't deny the shot, one of the most important shots in NBA history. Doncic is, as much as Jokic was an MVP this season, the wave of support for Luka was gigantic at the end. I mean, there was tons of people talking about how is this person who's averaging this level of points, rebounds, and assists, shooting at this level, not being discussed. Kind of like the Russell Westbrook corollary of the
Right.
team isn't quite good enough. But I don't think this is going to be a cakewalk. I think it's going to be
Of course not.
terrifying. I
No.
think you have these guys, but they're role players like PJ Washington, and who's the 20-year-old big body rebounder? Gosh, I haven't done any kind
Derek
of looking.
Lively, is that him or
Yes,
is it?
Derek
Yeah.
Lively. That's right. Yes.
Yep.
So it's kind of like the Wolves. They've got a couple of big name known
Yeah.
players,
Yeah.
and then you're going to have to get familiar with all of these other pieces. They've got a really smart coach. I mean, I think that stuff plays into it. And I don't know. The Wolves will be favored. They're going to have home court. The crowds, I just can't even imagine what this is about to be like
Wednesday.
downtown.
Yeah.
Friday, they're going to be hosting a downtown
gosh.
watch party.
Right.
4,000 people, I guess, can go to it. It's going to be nuts. Yeah, what an exciting time. There's no other way around it. You can be a
Yeah.
professional journalist and look at this and say there's nothing like a playoff run
No.
where it really feels like anything is possible and you have a championship shot. It's just, it's been a long time.
Anything is possible.
Anything is possible. Can they get
Yeah.
KG back? They did the KG hype video
I know.
before the quarter of game 6.
They do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he would they need to get him back in the building. I think I don't know if it happens now. I think we probably know what needs to happen before that happens. But yeah, I don't know. And part of it too is he's tweeting about him. He's talking about him
Yeah.
on his podcast all the time. Like he's got the love for himself. I mean, we not easy to forget, but like he played with Towns.
He played with Tal. Did he play with Ant?
No. He never would have played with that. That was like he was.
Oh, it was
gone
Wiggins. Wiggins, Levine.
He played with
yeah,
Wiggins. Yes, he
Yeah,
played
yeah.
with Wiggins in
Yep.
the Levine year too before they.
I'm thinking of Ricky Rubio.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And he did not play with Ant, but he played with Towns of the existing Wolves, so he's got that kind of
Did you see
connection
Pat
still.
Beverly? Did you see Pat Beverly saying nobody can ever talk bad about Towns again?
No, was he?
Yeah, I
was
was
that
like, wow, that's kind of, I never thought Pat Bev would be the one to come out of the woodwork with the but there you go.
I wonder what Draymond thinks right now.
Well,
Need more of Draymond's takes.
That's it. But again, it's like that thing where the level of sometimes disrespect that's shown. And okay, we should also, just speaking of things that from a fan's point of view,
Mhm.
it has to be acknowledged. It hasn't been talked about a lot because it's like it just it's swept up in a great win. Those refs at the end of that game were making some of the most questionable calls. Ant doesn't get the call on like a clear hack driving down the lane. They get Rudy on a little tic-tac thing where like Jokic is going out of bounds. They call Rudy. They foul Rudy out of the game. I mean, on some real just kind of touchy things. And even when you watch like post-game stuff, you just can feel people sort of going, oh, I guess Minnesota's for real. I guess this is a real thing. I guess we're going to have to go to Minneapolis for the Western Conference Finals.
Right.
And there are times when you're a fan of a team that's been so downtrodden that you're kind of waiting for that other shoe to drop, or you're waiting for some kind of enemy thing to come up and take it away from you. I don't know what that is. I don't know where it comes from. And the only relationship that we have to it is other like cursed types of franchises, or really cities. I mean, you think about like Boston for all those years where they just couldn't find a title, or Chicago,
their identity.
Cleveland. And I mean, I think the Wolves are going to be an easy team for neutral fans to root for.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
One final point on Dallas before we finish. They've got Kyrie, they've got Luka. I think the thing that really makes me like the Wolves in this series, aside from just I think they're the better overall team, is you unleash three really good perimeter defenders on those two guys. And I know that Dallas isn't just those two guys. They got Hardaway, they got other guys that can score in the perimeter, but like you got talking about Jaden with his length who can guard any of those guys. You're talking
Yep.
about Nah who can guard those guys and probably will for 25 minutes a game, and Ant who when he has energy, which is pretty much always, is a hellacious defender. And, he was saying after game 7, he had Jamal Murray in handcuffs in the second
Handcuffs.
half. And he kind of did. Like, Jamal
Yeah.
Murray didn't do much in the second half. So, like, those three guys for the guarding two makes me feel like everybody can be relatively fresh and wear
Yeah.
those guys out so that you can
Yeah.
have success on both ends.
Yeah, it does seem like if you're just looking at roster construction and you're kind of thinking about who's capable of what, that if Kyrie and Luka aren't really carrying them every single game, it's like I don't know where the rest of it comes from. Now, PJ Washington just went out and basically stole a series from Oklahoma City. I didn't get to watch a lot of that. It's like you get so deep into this Wolf stuff.
Right.
I didn't watch much of that series, but yeah, again, it's like you try not to get overconfident. You just kind of hope that, and again, I just think they have somehow put together this roster that seems to have this perfect little mixture of all of these pieces. Brash and confident and composed, just the sight of Mike Connolly makes you breathe a little bit of relief. And anybody can have an off game and they still can win. I mean, how many times do you think about game 6, Town scores 12, they win by 45, and then last night, Edwards did all of the little things that he could do in the second half, but it's not like he was lighting the world on fire. And they're not following any kind of straight up standard blueprint for team success. They're really playing like some of those Spurs teams did, where it's like, we're just going to outwork you in the collective and we're going to figure it out no matter if somebody's having a bad night or not. And it's just a testament. It's a testament to team building and roster cohesion and everybody getting their money, as we talked about many a month ago. Yeah.
We'll see where it all leads. We'll see if we're doing this again after another round. We'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's all gravy from this point on, I think. Yeah. I mean, it's like anybody, when the playoff bracket got announced, if this was the result, I think everybody on earth would have been thrilled if you're a Wolves fan.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Jeff Day, always a pleasure. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Ramball.
Great stuff from Jeff Day. Like I said at the beginning of the show, a couple things. One, Chris Hine joins me on tomorrow's show. We'll talk more Dallas matchup specific stuff. I want to pick his brain on Ant a little bit too, because I want to write something about him this week and just his character, his lovableness, how just the stream of consciousness for him is really endearing and that people have latched onto it. Obviously, there's a lot of different examples. Boosting our tourism industry with his new catchphrase, things like that. But I want to pick Chris's brain on a whole bunch of things. That will be on Wednesday's show. Also, like I said, Boston, Indiana, game 1 tonight. Could be the future opponent for the Wolves. You don't want to look too far ahead, but if you want to do some scouting, if you want to just watch a little NBA with it's a little less stressful than watching a game 7 or the conference finals, this might be for you. So Indiana at Boston, game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals is tonight. Let us finish with the cooler. Game 2 of the PWHL Finals is tonight. Minnesota against Boston. This one again in Boston. Minnesota fell behind that series 1-0. Trying not to fall into a 2-0 hole, although you know what? That could be right where they want them because Minnesota came back from that 2-0 deficit, surprisingly so. Another case of momentum, right? They'd lost 7 games in a row, 5 to end the regular season, 2 shutouts to start the playoffs. Then they just peel off 3 wins in a row out of nowhere. So don't overestimate the power of momentum in sports. It can change quickly. You get rolling in the other direction, so we'll see what PWHL Minnesota has in store tonight as they try to even the series against Boston. That'll do it for me today. Thank you so much for listening. Like I said a couple times, Chris Hine on tomorrow's show, Bobby Nightingale Jr. on a show later this week. Going to have special episodes off of Timberwolves playoff games Don't know if those will go up like right after the game or early the next morning, but those should be available to you pretty much as soon as you might want them. So listen for that in addition to regular programming. Until tomorrow, I am Michael Rand. We'll talk to you then.